Shoe Brew, and I've been starting to make a lot of videos and just kind of showing all the things I've learned over the years to help out new brewers. And one of the things that I've really gotten into the last year is water. And in years past, I've been brewing a little over 7 years, so 5, 6 years, I wasn't doing anything about water. And the start, I live in Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City water is actually really good to brew with for most styles. The best water is the best beers to brew with Kansas City water is hoppy beers like IPAs, pale ales. Belgian beers do really well with our water. Um, so that's why you see Boulevard doing really well with those beers. Um, Now, other style beers like stouts, my stouts were never really good using our water. Lagers never really were very good. Um, you know, other style beers where the water profile really needs to be correct, like an English style beers, the water really needs to be correct for the turnout right. So I started getting into the water a little bit. Uh, and one of the best tools out there, in my opinion, is the Bru'n Water Spreadsheet the Martin Brungard has put out there. It's a really, it looks very intimidating when you first get into it. It can be very technical, but in this video, I'm going to show you how it's actually pretty easy, especially if you do what I do. I do brew in a bag, and I do so it's no sparge, and I do 100% RO water instead of using my own Kansas City water. So that's one thing you'll have to decide if what you want to do. If you want to use your own tap water, you want to get it tested to find out what's already in your water so you can start from there. But if you don't want to mess with that, you can go to the grocery store and take a couple 5-gallon buckets and you can fill up RO water for, my Hy-Vee grocery store has, I get for 39 cents a gallon. So $2 to $3 to improve my beer seems like a no-brainer. Um, Again, if you test your own water, Ward Labs in Nebraska, I believe, has a really good kit. Most brewers like using. You just order the kit, you send a sample in, and you get a spreadsheet back of all what's in your water. Um, One thing to note on those tests, it's basically a test. You're testing the water at that time during that month, and depending on your water supply, those results will vary and change. In Kansas City, our water comes from the Missouri River, which is a huge flowing river that starts way up in Idaho, and so the water profile changes by season, and so the waters I've seen a lot of different Kansas City water profile from Ward Labs, and they're all a little different. So you kind of never know 100% what you've got, in my opinion, with when you test your water. But it's a good average more than anything. I've actually been contacted by Kansas City Water about trying to do some more home brewing things, about maybe putting out a quarterly report to kind of help homebrewers learn more about water. I know Water One in Johnson County on the Kansas side of Kansas City um, have been doing a pretty cool project with homebrewers. So I'm hoping KCMO Water will do the same. I'm not holding my breath though. KC Water is not exactly the most competent organization. But anyways, I'm getting off topic here. So look back to Bru'n Water. So Bru'n Water is a simple spreadsheet. You can go to his site, sites.google.com, site Brew Water, and he's got a free version which is real basic, or you can give him a donation on PayPal, which he deserves every bit about it. Throw him a couple 5, 10, $20 to support this because he has done so much for the homebrew community. He is constantly on the message boards. If you email him, he'll email you back very quickly. He's just a really good guy, really knowledgeable about water, and loves to talk about it. The website itself is pretty basic. He does have some things. He's got a good Facebook page now. He's been updating it. But anyway, so let me show you the spreadsheet. So this is just an Excel spreadsheet. So when I first got into this, I hate Excel. I'm not a big fan of it. Mainly because I don't know my Excel knowledge is very basic, so it can be intimidating looking at this thing. But it's got several tabs. This is the paid version. Um, the first tab is the instruction sheet, which Martin goes into, gets real deep into water, key terminology, lots of interesting things. If you're someone that's really technical, it's got really good stuff in here. I'm someone who's not super technical, so I kind of use this more of as a reference page. If something I need to look up, I can go back and look, and then I can, everything in here is pretty detailed. You can see how much stuff's in here, so I would highly recommend reading through that, and just as to kind of give you a good sense. There's a couple tabs in here. If I was going to get my water tested, this is where I would enter when I get my report back. This is where I would enter all the data that came back from that report to build my my water report. Again, I use 100% RO, so I don't touch this. The only thing I use is I set my program to use gallons because I'm an American. I don't use the metric system. But if you want to use the metric system, you can use liters. If you're a pro brewer, you can set it to barrels and hectoliters. That's probably the only thing you really need to mess with in here, unless you are getting your own report back, and this is where you would want to do that. One thing I do like about this program, if any place you see a little red triangle in the corner of the cell, has some good info on here. So biocarbonate, talks about what it is, how to check the units. It's got really good tidbits. So if you're kind of unsure, highlight over the cell in the red triangle, and it should help you clarify some things and help you go through this process of filling this out. Sparge acidification tab. Again, this is I don't sparge, so I don't even mess with this page. Again, this would be a page if you're someone who fly sparges, batch sparge, and you need to acidify, meaning you need to add acid to your water to basically control the pH. This is the tab and calculating tool you would use to come up with how much acid you would need to add and how much water you need to use for your sparging. Again, I don't use this at all because I don't sparge. I'm a brew-in-a-bag brewer, and so again, this makes things a little easier for me. So the first tab that I care about is my grain input, and it's really simple. You basically have your recipe, and I use Brewer's Friend. So this is my recipe here for an English mild style beer that I did a couple weeks ago. And I thought this would be a good demo because it's got a mix of base malt, it's got some crystal malt, it's got some roasted malt. And those are really the main things that really affect your pH in your beer are the colors of the actual wort. So it's pretty straightforward. Here you can take notes of what grain you're using. It's not that important in my opinion. So I've got 2 row, 5 pounds of that. I've got Munich. I think I had 2 pounds of that. The big thing on this page is getting the your color numbers right. So I'm using Lovely Bond as if you used the other measurement, you can use that. So I've got 1.8 Lovely Bond for 2 row. I got 10 Lovely Bond for Munich. And then I've got my dark crystal, which was 80, 80. And that's a crystal malt. And how much did I have again? I had 1 pound of that. And this is 80. So the darker malts, one thing you'll notice there is that your pH will change as you add grain, especially when you start adding dark grain and crystal malt. Dark malts will definitely affect your pH. And this is a predicted pH during your mash, what you want to get to. You're trying to get, we're trying to get into the green. And if we're not in the green, we'll show you how to adjust that and get there right. But pH between is, he's got a little chart down here. for crisp beer style, 5.2, 5.3, darker color beers, 5.4, 5.5, lighter colored, 5.3, 5.4. So it's kind of got, you want between that 5.2 and 5.5 pH range. If anything lower than 5.2, you're going to have a really tart and more acidic beer. If anything higher than 5.5, you're going to have a really over malty and kind of a bland beer. So that's kind of the goal. So I had some chocolate malt in here. I think it was 6 ounces. 6, and I believe chocolate is 350. Double check my thing. And I had 2 ounces of pale chocolate at 207. Roasted malt. 2. I noticed a red. Red means that this cell needs anything that ever turned red is something. It's basically saying, hey, you need to look at this and fix this. And it's shown that my Levy bond is not. I've selected a roasted malt, so I need to update that, which is 207. All right, so that's my grain bill. So kind of shows me how many pounds. Shows me my predicted pH, which actually I'm pretty close to where I'm trying to get to. Just by itself, if I just put it in with RO water, this beer would probably turn out okay. But I want to make it better. So now we go to the next tab, and this is where the fun comes in. So the paid version, the free version has a few water profiles you can pick from. The paid version has a lot more to pick from. They've got specific regions and city water profiles. If you want to make a true, German or English beer, you want to use, a water profile like the city water profiles come. If you notice in here, they've got boiled and non-boiled water. From what I've read, the boiled is the one that you want to use the most is the one you want to use. You want to use the boiled version over the regular version, especially when you're doing brew in a bag and no sparging. Basically, this is what you would come closest to the style. There's a lot more detail around that. I know I probably butchered that pretty bad, but if you want to know why the reason, I would go back in instructions. He explains why the boiled version, what the difference between the two is. I've always stuck with the boiled version mainly. It's worked out for me. But I'm doing an English mild, and so they've got a couple different English mild, English style profiles in here, and I was looking for the one. Oh, I'm going to use the mild ale profile instead. And there's this is where you can play around a lot with different profiles. Martin in the homebrew community, you can Google all these and figure out which ones work best for which styles. This is where you can play a little bit with your water and change things up. But anyway, so I selected my mild profile, and this is showing us we need 50 calcium parts per million. ppm stands for parts per million. We're going to need sodium, sulfite, chloride, and biocarbonate. I don't worry too much about the biocarbonate, but the 5 others are really what we're looking for. So the next step is, I don't have an existing water profile because I'm using RO. Now, if I filled out that water report input, this existing water profile would be set properly and match, which show here these numbers here. But I don't use that. I use the diluted water profile, which is RO, and I use 100% here. If you want to use distilled water, you can do that too. And RO has a little bit of minerals in it because it's not pure 100% RO. And it kind of shows you what I've got there. And then basically, so my mash and water profile is showing me what I need, showing what I have currently with no additions at all. So I've got little things to add here to fix that. So the next step is you scroll down. These are where my water additions. You want to set the total batch volume. So mine's 5.5, and how much water. If I go back to my recipe, I can go tools and I can do quick water requirements. So this mash based on my equipment is 7.61. So I want to update that number. 7.61. That's how much water I'm going to use. Now, if I was sparging, this is where you would put, your strike water first, and then how much sparge water. So that's where you would adjust that if needed. So let's talk about minerals. So the two main ones you're going to use are gypsum and calcium chloride. Epsom salt is one I use quite a bit to get the magnesium right. I've never used magnesium chloride because I just use Epsom salt. But you can use that. Canning salt, use sparingly for sodium. And make sure you want it non-iodized table salt. Baking soda I use once in a while to, if I need to get, it's good to get your sodium up if you're not going to use salt. Chalk I've actually never used before, so I've never used chalk. Pickle lime I actually do use quite a bit to get my calcium right when I don't want to add sulfate or chloride. And so basically what you're doing is you kind of just start with this addition, the blue box here, and if you look, it says addition gram per gallon. So I kind of just start with 2, see what that gets me. So if you see here, it added 12.3 parts per million calcium and 29.5 sulfate. I can go back, I can kind of scroll back up here. Okay, I've got a little bit of calcium to go. I've got to, and look at my sulfates now 30.5. So I've added a little bit, I've got a little more to go on that. So if I just wanted to bump that up to, let's say, 0.25, I've got, so my calcium went up. So I'm trying to match 40 is what I'm going for. So that's kind of where you play around with this and keep till you get the number you're looking for. All right, so I went over now. Now it's got a range in here. You can go over. You can drive yourself crazy trying to get perfect. I get within the range that's acceptable. If it's green, that means it's good to go. So, but you can keep twisting the numbers around to get the numbers you want. So that's going to be my gypsum addition. If you look over here, I'm going to add 2.05 grams in the mash water of gypsum. So, and it's based off grams per gallon here. So now I'm going to do the same thing with calcium chloride. Let's start at 2.5. All right. So calcium chloride adds calcium to your profile, and that adds chloride. So right now I'm looking pretty good. If I add a little more, I should be able to hit these numbers. Let's go 0.3. Let's see what we get. Again, we're getting closer. 0.35. All right, so the only thing we're missing now is sodium. So here I've got, my calcium looks good, my sulfate range looks really good, my chloride rate looks good. The only thing I could adjust is my sodium. So if you go look down here, there are 2 things I can add for sodium. That is canning salt, or I can add chloride. Or canning salt's going to adjust sodium and chloride. Well, chloride, I'm actually within the range I want to be. So if I add canning salt, that's going to screw up my chloride range. So if I added 0.25 of salt, it's gonna flag me because it's gonna be like, hey, you got way too much chloride in there, so you need to adjust that. So I do have the option of adding baking soda, which let's play around with baking soda. And baking soda, chalk, and pickle lime, those are bases, so those are going to raise your pH. If I add this to 0, notice my estimated pH went down. So when you add bases, your pH is going to go up. So it's kind of a fine balance of what you're trying to achieve. And almost perfect here. Let's see here. All right. I would say that is really close to what the profile I'm going for. So overall finished profile is what we're trying to match with the desired water profile. So I look really good. Sulfite looks good. My chloride level looks good. Look at my pH is in the range it needs to be for a dark malty beer. And then over here is where these are my measurements. I'm going to add the additions. I'm going to add 2.05 grams of gypsum, 2.66 grams of calcium chloride, and then 1.37 grams of baking soda. And that's it. This profile's pretty straightforward. It doesn't get complicated. I don't have to add any acid. This is if you needed that acid. I use phosphoric acid, 75% phosphoric acid. That mainly I have a chemistry friend that works in a lab and can get this for me for free. So that's what I use. You can use lactic acid. You want to make sure that your percentages are correct in here. And if you needed to add acid into your water to get you acid will drop your pH down. So if my pH was too high, I would add acid to get this right. But that looks good enough for me for this beer. And so that's all you would do. I would get my RO water from the grocery store, start heating it up. I'd measure out my minerals and salts very carefully. That's a whole. You want to get a special scale that can do tenths to hundredths of grams, and get a little cup and very carefully measure those out. It's very important to be accurate. If you accidentally spill a bunch of baking soda in your cup that you're using to measure out, you want to start over. You don't want to take chances with adding too much because then you're going to really make funny tasting beer. But I add it as soon as the water starts heating up. I will add this in before I mash in, and that's pretty it. And you can save this Excel file, and they're ready to brew beer, and your water should be ready to go. Um, this tab here gives you a nice little adjustment summary sheet if you wanted to print this off for some reason, or um, it gives a nice little look of again what I'm adding, my mash, my profile, what I'm looking at. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully, this video will make you think about adjusting your water. It's really not that scary. Again, I highly suggest if you want to know, brewing it back makes it way easier because you don't have to worry about figuring out your sparge additions too. Using 100% RO water makes it real easy. No guessing on what your water might be from your water report. And if I highly recommend if you use Bru'n Water is to get the paid version and give Martin, give him some money for all his help and support. Again, he is very knowledgeable. If you have any water questions, he's more than willing to ask. He's usually pretty active on a lot of the message boards out there and social media too. So don't be afraid to ask him questions. I'm sure he's heard a lot of stupid questions and a lot of good ones too. So, but that's all I've got. Happy brewing. Talk to you guys later.